Hi, I'm Vinit Sinha, Director Cybersecurity SME at MasterCard. I am part of the DLC Security and Cybersecurity Committee at Delhi chapter. I am going to today speak at the DLC talk on the very interesting topic, which is data loss prevention system, cornerstone towards financial and individual data privacy. Cybersecurity, if we talk about, has taken a leap in over the last few years. And the reason because is of the overspanning perimeter for the organizations and the individual security. Few years back, when we used to see, which is pre-pandemic, there was a kind of an environment which was created across the organization, which was primarily restricted only to the perimeter within the organization boundary. But because of the pandemic, individuals and the organization have to expand their footprints, not only to a specific region or to a geography, but to a more larger, wider of a spectrum, which is onto the cloud and remote working. This has led to a lot of attackers, their attack patterns, their methodologies been evolving. And that has led to a greater importance of a threat vector being evolving across the regions. Now, we have to understand why this has become a critical component in the overall journey. The reason because is that information asset or the digital asset that we know today have become of prime importance, because today any business, any organization that you're talking about, whether it's financial, whether it's utilities, whether it's healthcare, each of the organizations today are dealing their work over a system. And now that has led to an evaluation of a lot of critical data across the organization. The reason for even understanding this in more detail is that because of this information assets being evolving and data becoming the new oil for most of the organization, it is becoming very, very prudent for the attackers to really get hand onto some of these pieces. Ponemon Institute recently did conducted a survey, and when they evaluated the valuation of data assets across the organization, it has ranged from starting from $3.18 per record to a massive data value of close to $90 per record. Now, if you look at this and if you understand the importance, you will realize why information asset is becoming so critical in today's world. For that, you need to even understand that the attackers, their methodologies are always evolving, and they are on the fly to really get hand on to some of these information assets. Now, because of these information assets becoming so critical, the insider threats are also evolving, because now today organization and the competitors who are working against your organizations are also looking at valuing this data. Now, what are they doing? Is that they are also implanting certain resources within the organization who are sitting as an insider threat for some of their competitive organization in order to get hands-on of this data. Now, these has led to a lot of data challenges, right? One is that the attackers are targeting your data, and the second is that the insider threats which are sitting. Now, to manage some of these pieces, you need to understand the value of these data. There are various types of data sets which are there in the organization today. There are PII, there are PFI, there are PHI data, there is customer information, there is business information, there are customer contracts. All of these are of critical nature. Let's say, I'll take an example. Let's say a competitive organization gets onto a contract of an organization where you were working, okay? And then you have a large business value with that organization. And they get hands-on the SOW and the entire desktop procedures that they are following. What is that going to lead? It is going to help the competitive organization to create their own set of methodology on top of the data set that is they are offering as part of the customer base, and also to build something more holistic, which will be a more value added to the customer. Now, in that case, what will happen is the customer is obviously going to go towards that organization which is giving more value. Now, you have to realize that these kind of stuff makes the data even more critical. PFI data, personal financial information. Now, their personal financial information, if you look at it, have been also given a lot of value, right? Because you have your credit card numbers, you have your Aadhaar numbers, which are there very, very associated with some of these pieces. The PII data are further classified into more criticality, right? Because not only your email address, your name, your phone number are critical, because around all of these information, you have most of your data sets which are there revolving. So if I have to onboard a customer on my organization payment system, What kind of information do I need from him? I would need his name, his email address, his phone number, and date of birth, right? These are the set of information. Now, let's say if these information lands onto somebody else who is an attacker, right? How do you basically reset your password? Is through these information, right? Through the email system, through your address, through your date of birth. These are the verification medium. Now, if an attacker have these set of data value, he is going to use that data set in order to get access to your system and infrastructure, right? So this becomes very, very critical that you need to save some of these pieces, right? The other important piece, while the data criticality is something that we have already understood, is important to understand how do we prevent some of these pieces. But before even preventing, you need to understand that the implication of these data loss, how are they going to have a larger impact to you as an organization? From a data loss perspective, you have to undergo a lot of fine if in case even one single breach. Recently, CERTIN published a set of data guidelines where they said that if in case any incident it happens across your organization, you have to immediately report. Now, the challenge is that most of the organization are still not able to identify an event or an attack for more than 200 to 300 odd days. Though the CERTIN has laid out that guideline, but if you do not have the right set of mechanism in place where you are able to identify some of these data set, the events and the incidents that are happening, obviously these regulations are of no use. Though you may be going ahead and informing the CERTIN after that, but I think it's too late in the day. So for that, you need to have some kind of a mechanism where you are able to identify some of these pieces. And for identification, you need to have the right set of technology and tools deployed in your organization. Now to touch upon a very interesting tool, and I think there are hundreds of tools which are there in the cybersecurity domain, which you as an organization you need to deploy or employ. But what is needed and what is important that you need to understand that data loss prevention, data leakage, as we talk about, or they are used in synonyms, are of critical importance. Now, how it helps, let's understand that. There are two types of data loss prevention systems which are there. One is that you need to understand about the network level data loss prevention system, and then there is a gateway level data loss prevention. In order to understand that, let me take a very practical example. Okay. Let's say you are sitting in an organization, okay? There is an employee who has his last day tomorrow. But what he does, he is transferring all his data, which was there in his laptop, before the last day, and he's not even connecting to the network. And he is taking a copy of the entire data set which he had, which are very, very critical from an organization perspective, onto a USB port and taking it away. Now, that's an impact to organization. Why it is an impact? Because the critical data set, which was not supposed to go out of the organization, is on somebody's USB, which he can go ahead and use it for whatever purpose he wants. Now, the other example that I would like to highlight, let's say you are working on a system which is very, very critical, and you have a lot of sensitive information. As an organization, you have enabled Facebook or let's say a Gmail in your organization. And somebody copy that data set and paste it on either Gmail or on any of the other sensitive areas. Now, what has that led to? That has led to the breach of sensitive organizational data set to an unauthorized individual or to a party where he shouldn't have an access to. Now, you need to understand and realize the importance of these. Okay? To prevent that, as I talked about, there are two sets of DLP solutions. One is your network level and the other one is the host level. There is a component which sits on your system. The moment you are trying to transfer any data set out of the particular system, an alert is getting generated. The alert triggers to the system administrator or to the network administrator, whoever is monitoring that particular system. And he is now have an alert that a particular data set which was there, which is very critical from an organization perspective, is now been tried to be sent out of the organization environment. That gives you a kind of an indication that there is a malicious individual who is sitting inside your organization who is trying to take the data out of the environment. Now, the other piece which is also important, and I'll just relate with another example as I talked about, let's say there is an individual who is trying to upload PAN card, a PAN number, which is the permanent account number of the credit card, onto, let's say, Facebook, and he have access to some, let's say, 1,000 customers. Now, what is that going to lead to? It is going to lead an implication, because there are certain, in India, we follow the methodology where we have a two-factor authentication, and we generally send an OTP to the end user in order to really authenticate if in case he's the genuine guy who has been doing that transaction. But some of the countries, we do not follow that process. All we need is the permanent account number, which is the PAN, the expiry date, and the CV number, and it's all done. So the transaction is over. So I think it's very important for us to understand the criticality of the data, the value set in terms of how these are getting uploaded. And third important piece is to how you will actually manage some of these pieces. To manage this, there are DLP solutions, and we have already talked about the host and the network level DLP. But how does the network and the host-based DLP actually works in a real case scenario? They are basically 3 or 4 types of DLP solution, and this is how you can actually create a set of policies, as we talk about, to stress more, and that is how you will be able to define the right set of organization data set value. One is that a rule set, where you define that, okay, if I see any kind of a PAN card, Aadhaar card, any kind of a PII, which is a little sensitive in terms of address, the automatically DLP as a solution does not allow you to copy and paste it on the respective environment, or it does not allow you that document to be sent out to a respective email address. The second important piece is to understand that the file matching. So let's say if in case I have some sensitive file, and through an IRM solution, which is the information rights management solution, I have classified that file as sensitive or super sensitive, or even confidential from that matter. So the moment the file is been seen as sensitive, super sensitive, or confidential, the file will automatically get blocked, and it will not be sent out of the environment. The third piece is that if in case you have some partial data, it's not that you have the complete data file, you do not have the complete data set, but you have certain samples. So let's say if in case you have a kind of a Word document which have the entire context about your business and everything, and then it also carried some kind of a credit card information or something more as part of the data set. Now what will DLP as a solution will do? It will see that whether what kind of a data set that is carries. Let's say if in case it has some sensitive client contract embedded into it. So it will, from the database, it will try to map that data set. And if it sees that the data set exists in the database, it will immediately block it. Second, if in case the PAN card data matches, then also it will stop it. So these are basically called as the expressions or the policies that can be built on the data set. Another important piece which we need to understand, that the consequences of all of these data loss are very, very critical. You have regulatory implications, you have the loss in business reputation, you are losing the customer trust, you are losing the financial losses because the client is not going to give you business any further. So that's leading to financial losses. So this is because of so much of implications. You need to understand the value of all of this information and to understand the value of how things evolve over a period of time. Now, as an organization, while I am implementing the data loss prevention system, we need to understand some of the very, very critical components. Now, first is to understand the data flow. Where is the data going and where is the data coming? That's the first critical components you need to understand. Once you have an understanding about the data flow, you need to understand what kind of data set it is carrying. Now, let's say if you have an ex-customer where you are sending some kind of an information, what kind of a data flow is happening with that customer? Is it a PII data? Is it a PHI data? Is it a client confidential information? Is it the business confidential information? You need to understand that. Once you have been able to identify that, there is a kind of policies embedding that you need to start defining. And based on the organization infrastructure and environment that you carry, whether you are carrying a Windows machine, you are carrying a Linux server, or you have any other kind of a system, or you are using a Mac operating system in your organization, you need to find the right set of technology which you are going to embed into. If you have, let's say, a Linux machine, you have a Windows machine, and you have a kind of a Mac machine, but you are only deploying these agents onto specific individuals' machine within the organization and only doing it for some critical individuals, there are likely possibility that the breach will continue to happen. Why? Because an individual who knows that his system is getting blocked through some of these transactions which is happening, this may lead to he'll be sending out the file to some other individual who have the access to send in that information out of the organization infrastructure and the network. So it's very important that you understand the criticality, deploy the technology uniformly rather than doing it on a selective basis at an individual to individual basis. And then you start building your policies. The policies, you cannot do it in one go, because that until unless you are not learning the kind of data flow, the kind of data set that are flowing across your organization, you may not be able to build a very effective policy there. So it's very important that you choose the right set of technology and the policy while you are implementing data loss prevention. So at the end, and then before I take up closer to this conversation, I think it's very important for us to understand 3-4 important points. One is the data flow, the kind of data that you handle across your organization, the kind of threat actors, the threat methodologies that are evolving in your region, and fourth is the right set of technology which you need to implement as an organization. So with that, I'll close this conversation. Thank you so much.